Welcome back to Women of Worth, the podcast dedicated to helping you embrace your personal power and live your life authentically. Today, we're diving into a topic that so many women struggle with: reclaiming personal power and releasing the guilt that holds us back. For many of us, guilt creeps into our lives in subtle and not so subtle ways, whether it's feeling guilty for taking time for ourselves, saying no, or even pursuing our ambitions. This guilt can leave us feeling powerless, drained, and disconnected from what we truly want. In today's episode, we'll explore what it means to reclaim your personal power, why guilt diminishes it, and the challenges women face in letting go of that guilt. Most importantly, we'll share practical steps to help you take back control, set boundaries, and embrace self-care, along with real-life examples of women who have successfully reclaimed their power. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We release new episodes every week, all designed to help you grow, thrive, and live authentically. And if you know someone who could benefit from reclaiming their personal power, share this episode with them. Now, let's get into it. Here's how you can start reclaiming your personal power and releasing guilt, one step at a time.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
It's great to be back.
Today we're tackling something pretty big. I think something that affects so many of us, especially women.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about personal power.
Yeah, reclaiming that power and really understanding what it means to break free from that guilt that can just hold us back, you know?
Exactly, and I think it's something that's so easy to get caught up in. Right? Like we have all these expectations on us. And,
absolutely.
And it can be really hard to sort of break free from that and figure out like what does it actually mean to feel powerful in my own life? It
is. And you know, it's something that I see so often in my work with women is this sense of like they're doing all the things right. You know, they're successful in their careers. They have families.
Right.
But there's still this underlying feeling of like, I'm not really in control.
Yeah, like there's this script that you're supposed to follow.
Exactly.
If you deviate from that script, then
the guilt comes in.
Yeah.
Right. Like, who are you to, step outside of what's expected of you?
Well, and that guilt, I think, is really what we want to kind of unpack today. I think it's such a sneaky thing. You know, it's not always like this big, obvious thing.
Right.
It can be these little subtle things that just kind of chip away at you.
It is. It's insidious.
Yeah.
You know, and it keeps you playing small. It keeps you from really stepping into your full potential.
So let's start by defining, like, what do we actually mean when we say personal power? What does that even look like?
Yeah, well, I think it's more than just, being assertive or kind of like bossing people around.
Right.
It's really about this deep inner knowing of your own strength and value, and then making choices that are aligned with that, with your values, and not letting those external pressures kind of dictate your life.
It's like having that inner compass that guides you,
exactly.
Even when the seas are rough or the winds are blowing you off course.
Exactly. It's that knowing of like, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and I'm not going to compromise that for anyone or anything.
That sounds so empowering.
It is.
But I can already hear some of our listeners thinking like, okay, that sounds great in theory, but like, how do you actually do that?
Right.
In the real world when you've got all these pressures and expectations coming at you?
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things is that we have to acknowledge that there are these societal expectations that are placed on women, especially to be everything to everyone. The perfect wife and mother and employee and friend and, all of the things. And it's just not possible.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It's completely unrealistic. And so when we try to live up to that,
we end up feeling guilty.
We end up feeling guilty. We end up feeling inadequate.
Right.
We end up feeling like we're failing no matter how much we're doing.
So it's like you're in this constant state of feeling like you're not enough. You're not doing enough. You're not being enough.
Exactly. And that feeling can be so incredibly draining and disempowering.
So how does this actually play out in real life? Like, what are some examples of how guilt can show up and sabotage our sense of power?
Sure. So let's take an example. So we have Sarah. She's a working mom.
Okay.
And she's constantly juggling, the demands of her career and her family. And she feels guilty because she feels like she's not spending enough time with her kids. But then she also feels guilty when she's at work that she's not giving her all to her job.
It's like she's damned if she doesn't.
Exactly. And it's this constant feeling of like, I'm failing no matter what I do.
And it's not just working moms, right? And I mean, I think this is something that a lot of women struggle with, like even just saying no.
Oh, absolutely.
Can bring up so much guilt.
Yeah. Think of Emily. So Emily is someone who she's always saying yes to every request.
Oh, I know an Emily.
Right. Whether it's volunteering at her kids' school or baking for a bake sale or, taking on extra projects at work. She can't say no.
And she ends up exhausted and resentful.
Completely. And feeling like she's letting everyone down.
Right.
Even though she's doing all the things.
So how do we start to break free from this? Like, it feels like such a trap.
It is a trap. And it's something that, we've been conditioned to do for generations. Women have been taught to be the caregivers,
right? To
be the pleasers, to put everyone else's needs before their own.
And if you step outside of
And if you step outside of that, then you're selfish.
Yeah.
You're not a good woman, and so we've really internalized that message.
So we've got Sarah, who's torn between work and family, and Emily, who can't say no.
Yeah.
Are there other common scenarios where we see this guilt showing up?
Oh, yeah, all the time. So let's talk about Maria. So Maria is a very successful executive.
Okay.
But she struggles with guilt about not being a more hands-on mother. She loves her career. She's ambitious.
Right.
But she feels like she should be, baking cookies and attending every school event.
Like there's this conflict between her ambition and what society tells her she should be doing as a woman and as a mother.
And it creates this inner turmoil that makes it hard for her to fully embrace her success.
Like she almost feels like she has to apologize for it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we have Sarah, we have Emily, we have Maria. And then what about someone who, maybe they're not a working mom, maybe they're not even a mom, but they have these dreams and desires that they feel guilty about pursuing.
Absolutely. So let's think about Jessica.
Okay.
So Jessica, she dreams of traveling the world, but she feels guilty even thinking about leaving her family and responsibilities behind, even for a short time.
Like it's selfish to want something for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, who are you to think that you deserve to go off and have an adventure?
So these examples, they really paint a picture of how this guilt can just be this major roadblock to claiming our personal power.
Yeah.
But before we dive into solutions, I think it's important to acknowledge like the challenges that we face as women in trying to break free from this guilt cycle.
It's not easy.
Right.
It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to decide to feel empowered and then everything's going to be fine.
Right. It's not a light switch.
No.
Yeah.
There are these deep-seated societal norms and expectations that can make it really, really hard to prioritize yourself and set boundaries without feeling that wave of guilt washing over you.
Right. And I think that's what we really want to explore next is like, what are those challenges?
Yes.
And how can we start to overcome them?
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is this idea of cultural conditioning. Oh. We've been taught for generations that as women, we're supposed to be self-sacrificing.
Right. Like we're supposed to put everyone else's needs before our own.
Exactly. And it's like we've been handed this script for how to behave. And if we step outside of that script,
we're the bad guy.
We're selfish. We're not, good women. We're not doing what we're supposed to do.
Right. And it's so ingrained, I think, in our society that it can be really hard to even recognize it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's the fear of judgment.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, what will people think if I actually do put myself first?
Absolutely. And think about Rachel. So Rachel's a young woman who wants to start her own business.
Okay.
She has this great idea, but she's terrified of what people will say if she leaves her stable job.
Right. Like, what if she fails?
Yeah. What if she fails? What if people think she's being selfish?
What if she's not a good mom because she's working?
Exactly. All of those fears can just be paralyzing.
And it can keep us playing small.
Absolutely.
Right. Like, we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to make waves.
They don't want to disappoint.
And then there's perfectionism.
Oh, yes.
Talk about a recipe for guilt.
Right. It's this constant pressure to be perfect in every area of our lives.
Like you can never relax. You can never just be good enough.
Never good enough. It's always like, what else can I do? How can I do it better?
Yeah, you're on this treadmill that never ends.
Think about Emma. So Emma spends hours crafting these perfect social media posts.
I know it, Emma.
Right, like agonizing over every word and image.
Yeah.
And she's exhausted and stressed, but she can't seem to let go
Of that need to be perfect.
of that need to present this perfect image to the world.
And it's not just social media, right? It's like,
It's everything.
it's our homes, it's our kids, it's our work, it's our relationships, it's our bodies. It's just this pervasive pressure to be perfect.
So how do we start to let go of that? Because it's exhausting.
It is exhausting, and it really robs us of our joy. Because we're never present. We're always striving for this
unattainable ideal.
Exactly. And then there's the challenge of setting boundaries, which I think is huge.
Oh, huge.
Especially for women.
Especially for women, because we're so often the ones who are expected to be
The caregivers.
the pleasers, the ones who say yes to everything.
Right. And so saying no can feel
so guilty.
like you're letting everyone down.
Exactly. Think about Lauren.
Okay.
She's a really kind-hearted woman who always feels obligated to help everyone, even when it means sacrificing her own time and energy.
I know Lauren.
Right. She can't say no. She feels so guilty.
And it ends up hurting her.
It does. It ends up hurting her, and it ends up, preventing her from really living her own life.
Right. It's like you're giving everyone else permission to dictate how you spend your time and energy.
Exactly.
So we've got these challenges, right? We've got cultural conditioning, fear of judgment, perfectionism, and difficulty setting boundaries. Like,
it's a lot.
It feels kind of overwhelming.
It is.
So how do we actually start to break free from all of this and reclaim our power?
Well, it really starts with awareness. We have to first acknowledge and accept our emotions.
So not try to push them away.
No, not push them away, but really sit with them, explore them, understand where they're coming from.
Okay.
And journaling can be a really powerful tool for this, just to kind of like write down, what triggers those feelings of guilt.
Right.
What thoughts come up? What are you feeling in your body when you experience those feelings?
And so by doing that, you can start to maybe identify some of those patterns
Exactly
that are leading to the guilt.
Yeah. So for example, like Emily, who we talked about, who struggles to say no.
Right.
She might realize that her guilt stems from this fear of disappointing others.
Oh, yeah.
And by acknowledging that fear, she can then start to question it. Like, are her needs really less important
than everyone else's?
And everyone else's, exactly.
And once you've sort of started to unpack those feelings of guilt, then what?
Well, then it's time to start setting boundaries.
Okay, and how do we do that?
It's about really recognizing that your needs and desires are just as important as anyone else's. And it's about communicating those needs clearly and respectfully.
Okay.
But without apology.
So like with Lauren, who we talked about, who always felt obligated to help everyone.
Yes.
Could she start by just saying no more often?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing.
Right.
It can just be a simple, I appreciate you asking, but I'm not able to do that right now.
And that's enough.
And that's enough.
I think that's so hard for a lot of women, though.
It is. It takes practice.
Yeah.
But each time you do it, you're building that muscle.
Right.
You're reinforcing that boundary, and you're realizing that the world doesn't end.
When you say no.
When you say no.
And what about perfectionism? How do we start to tackle that beast?
Well, I think it starts with self-compassion. Reminding yourself that no one is perfect.
Oh, that's hard.
It is, but it's so important, and it's about shifting your focus from striving for perfection to striving for progress.
Yeah.
So instead of beating yourself up for every mistake, you're celebrating your efforts and you're learning from those mistakes.
So like with Emma, who is trying to create that perfect online persona.
Yes.
She could maybe start by just posting a photo without editing it or sending an email without agonizing over every word.
Exactly. And it might feel uncomfortable at first.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
But each time you do it, you're chipping away at that perfectionism.
You're giving yourself permission to be human.
Exactly.
And then there's self-care, which I think is so crucial.
Oh, absolutely. Self-care is not selfish. It's essential.
It's like putting on your own oxygen mask.
Yes.
Before assisting others.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. You've got to fill your own cup first.
Exactly. And self-care doesn't have to be this big, elaborate thing.
Right.
It can be as simple as taking a few minutes for yourself each day to do something you enjoy.
Yeah, even if it's just like 5 minutes.
Even if it's just 5 minutes to just sit in silence and breathe.
that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
And finally, I want to talk about community, because I think that's been so important for me.
Me too. Community is everything.
Like surrounding yourself with people who support you and encourage you and who get it.
Yes. Think about Lauren again. So she could maybe join a women's support group where she can connect with other women who understand her challenges and celebrate her victories.
And that can be so empowering.
It is. It's about realizing that you're not alone.
Right.
And that other women are going through similar things.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about what personal power is, why it's so important for women, and how guilt can sabotage our sense of control. We've discussed the challenges that we face. And most importantly, we've explored some practical solutions for breaking free from that guilt trap.
Absolutely.
And reclaiming our power.
It's a journey, not a destination. So be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never stop reaching for your full potential.
And as you embark on this journey, remember this: you are worthy, you are capable, you are strong.
Yes.
And you have the right to create a life that feels authentic, joyful, and deeply fulfilling.
So true.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into reclaiming your personal power. And if this episode resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this with someone who might need to hear this message. Let's create a community of support where we can all empower each other to heal and grow and thrive. Hope you found it helpful and empowering, and we'll see you next time.